Is my audio is audible?
Hello, am I?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Nationalism is the policy of limiting a nation involvement in the international affairs, has shaped the course of history by prioritizing the national self-reliance and minimizing the external entanglement. Before that, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Firstly, I be to the I will give my credit to the timekeeper, the honorable judge, and also my fellow debaters. So, what is currently happening around the world revolving with the issue of nationalism? Nationalism of the what is currently happening around the world right now is the world may have some relationship, but also it will also impact on their own countries. And what are these currently our problem? What happening on this
Recording
on
in
this,
progress.
on the on this on the affair of international affair? The problem is with much more strength, with much more closer relationships. They will have much. They will becoming mass. The foreigner will come in a large amount and also they will exploit our resource in the country. And and what I'm going to define of this what I'm going to define in this debate are for Asian to improve their stability. We were going to block any foreign entrance and also restricted any any relationship outside of Asia, and also without any influence of foreign political ideology that will also interrupt our own stability. Okay. I will move with my arguments. Firstly, why we should most likely to be using isolationism is because firstly job preservance because of the mass entrance of foreign the mass entrance of the foreign would make the slot of the work the opportunity for the citizens of the country to obtain a job is really hard, in which most of our countries are being occupied by foreigners from Bangladesh, and by stopping them from entering the country, we would give much more opportunity toward the another generation of our citizens. We can take the example of Japan in the Edo period. At the time, Japan adopted an ideology of nationalism in which they restricted affairs and also restricted trading among other countries until the mid 19th centuries, in which they accepted the foreign relationship. Secondly, with it secondly, abundance of resources because of the law by adopting the ideology of nationalism, we could stop the exploitation of the resource and also focusing our resource on the things that was possibly used, like infrastructures, education, and healthcare. By the mean of the exploitation of the resources, we can take from Malaysia. When the Malaysia been conquered
Recording
by the
stopped.
Dutch, the Spanish, and also the Japanese, the British, and also the Japanese, most of the resources been exploited used for their own income and also for their own greed. And we also can take the example of the abundance of resource by the nationalism by United States time of 20th century, in which in which they minimalize their relation affair, in which they most likely use their resource focus on their own infrastructure and also their benefit to the countries. And lastly, national identity preservation. By reducing the social exchange, we could think of national value in which we could preserve our country without any influence throughout any foreign countries. And also, we could take from the example of Bhutan. The Bhutan was most likely to be isolated by the Himalayan range. Had most likely to be had also been used has also been preserving their own cultural, making their culture still not fade away after a few centuries until recently the Bhutan was open. So my conclusion are nationalism is an ideology that was meant to stop exploitation and increasing the autonomy for the countries without any intervention from other foreign country. I end my speech. Thank you.
All right, thank you to opening government, Prime Minister. Now I'd like to invite the leader of opposition.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm figuring out my camera.
Yeah, up to you. If you don't want to turn on your camera, it's fine. Hello? Hello, hello?
Wait. Okay. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, I think that the government has mistaken this isolationism issue as an immigrant issue. They mentioned that if foreigners if foreigners are coming to our country, they will steal our resources, not really steal, but it will reduce our resources, thus um, will also uh, lessen our job opportunities among locals. Now, this is one of the things that I would like to say. I would like to say that the government did not understand the motion correctly, because this motion is talking about international relations. Immigrants are coming, yes, of course, because of international relations, but if we didn't restrict, or don't uh, if we don't exclude other countries, we could also solve this immigrant issue by only restricting immigrants, not just cutting ties in terms of economy, in terms of diplomacy, or in terms of technology with other countries. Because of one issue, we're taking it too far. Thus, it will bring us harmful effects in other aspects, such as economy, security, and also innovation, technology. The Prime Minister also mentioned in their argument that mass entrance of foreigner means that oh, sorry, I will rephrase my sentence. Restricting more foreigners will also means more job opportunities. Now, this is not an issue in the first place because right now in our country, we're facing a problem with immigrants. But the problems with immigrants are basically their attitude, not job opportunities. We don't have that problem yet because we're very aware that our local human capital is also very good. So it's not a problem. Now, they give an example of Malaysia having relations with Japanese, British, and Dutch, and what's the problem with this. And this is not a relevant issue because in the first place, it's not exactly relation. It doesn't have anything to do with isolationism because this is an issue about colonialism. This is about colonialism. If we do adapt this isolationism uh, ideology, this will bring more harms than good. And I will explain to this in my arguments. Before that, any POIs? No? Okay. Now, the issue is if we adapt this ideology, that there will be poor economic growth, there will be no diplomatic relation, thus no country to ask for help if we're insecure in terms of military security. Thus, aside from that, our technology won't be advanced because we can't adapt from other countries, and our mindset and our mentality will be very, very backwards. Now, we oppose this ideology for ASEAN countries because of the harmful effects it will bring in terms of security, innovation, and economy. Now, as you all know, ASEAN countries are not first world countries. We are still, most of us uh, are still developing countries. So my first argument will be about how our isolationism will affect our national security or defense. Why is this true? First, less to no diplomatic relations with other countries will also means that less military aids. Why is this important? Because it helps us with security. So if there are no relations, thus no help will be received or less help will be received. Why is this bad? Because say if there were war on ASEAN countries, there will be no or limited countries to help us. Thus, we will have a disadvantage on this since our security is very weak compared to other countries that have military aid. So we're very weak in comparison in terms of military aid. Second in my argument, I will explain how in terms of economic growth. Why will we have poor economic growth? First, there will be less exports, less people to buy our own products. Thus, it will lead to the increase of gross domestic production and also increase of gross domestic income. Why is this important? Because the country ASEAN is still a developing countries. Most of us are still developing countries, and this will make our country's income decrease. Why is this bad? This will not only affect the government, but also the citizens. It will lead to worst case scenario, inflation. Food will be more expensive, shelter will be more expensive. Thus, this will be a human right issue. So if the judge wants to side with us, then then if you agree that our side covers more issues, then you'll side with us. Before that, any POIs?
These are, I have POI. These are
Okay.
treaties.
Sorry, it's 6 minutes, 20 seconds. Please.
Okay, sorry. Now, thus, we oppose isolationism because of the harmful effects it will bring in terms of security and economy. And my partner then will explain about innovation. I rest my case. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to close up the opening government side debate.
Hello. Am I audible?
So my first argument
Yes,
is that
yes.
isolationism brings more.
Okay, wait a few seconds. I need to sort out my arguments and stuff.
Because particularly in notes and eliminating uh,
Okay, so I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. It seems like the opposition side has forgotten the history of what has Malaysia has gone through and what the Asian countries have themselves have gone through. Now, before that, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I bid to the meticulous timekeepers. I bid to the panel of educators and to everybody present here in this debate today. Now, a few things I will be doing in my debate today. First off, I will be rebutting against what the Prime Minister said. Secondly, I will be giving out my own arguments to further support the motion. And thirdly, I will be doing only single extensions to what my Prime Minister said. And lastly, I will be doing conclusions which will include trade-offs and which will include comparatives. Now, first off, uh, the Prime Minister recently said, sorry, the leader of opposition recently said that apparently the opposition side has mistakenly understood mistakenly understood what my prime minister said. So the way she understands that my prime minister has given so far that she understands that it brings in immigrants which will reduce our resources and lessen our job opportunities. Please do remind yourselves that Malaysia was once a colonized country and we have been exploited resources before by the United Kingdom, by the Portuguese and by the Netherlands themselves. And that is why we are not in the first world country in the first place. Secondly, she also says that there are other ways other than isolationism and not by restricting foreigners and there will be less exports. Do remind yourself that during the 90s and during the 2000s when Malaysia was experiencing an economical turmoil that foreign countries tried to help Malaysia uh to help Malaysia grow back into a stable country. But Mahathir rejected Mahathir rejected the Tun Dr. Mahathir rejected the IWF fund and look at the condition of Malaysia today, where it is more a sustainable country, and we are now in a more economical stability. She also said that that without any
Joy.
foreign without any foreign diplomatic ties, there will be poor economic growth. Technology will be not advanced as it is before, and there will be less military aids. But she did not elaborate it further. I am hoping the deputy leader of opposition will explain this to me further to make me understand that what you are trying to say. Now, I will be moving on to my second part of my speech, which is the arguments. Now, first off, my arguments is firstly, um, why ASEAN commits to isolationism in the first place is because we want to preserve sovereignty and autonomy. Now, why do I say this in the first place? Because it will reduce foreign influence. Now, why is this an important issue? Is because that in the countries in Southeast Asia has been so many times have been influenced by foreign countries such as the US in the Philippines, the communists in the Vietnam, and France in China, etc.
Joy.
Now, no, sorry. Now, why do I say this? It's because that we need to avoid geopolitical conflicts, which is also a part of my rebuttal against the Prime Minister. Now, avoiding geopolitical conflict is one of the main things that we want to avoid itself because in status quo, China and the US is currently having severe ties between themselves, and therefore we have a higher chance of seeing them going to war. And we have seen that the US and China themselves have taken part of their allies. For example, US have taken allies such as South Korea and Taiwan, and China has been taking Russia and North Korea. Now, why is this important? Why is this important that we back off from geopolitical conflicts? Because if we were to experience a conflict, this can have a very bad effect on the economy of the Asian countries themselves. And it can also help us reduce military engagements because we don't want any conflicts with other nations. Now I'll be moving on to my second argument, which is a more economical independence. Now, in my rebuttal, I recently said that Mahathir has helped a lot by not receiving any funds from outside countries and gradually improve the country slowly but surely. If we were to only rely on help from the outside world or foreign, and we don't know how to sustain ourselves, then we will have a more slower economic growth compared to what the Prime Minister have said. Now, why do I say this? Because if we take a look examples in Africa, for example, they have received so many help from the International World Fund, or maybe the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or maybe help from the US and maybe help from the China. Now, why don't they become a why don't they become a first world country in the first place? Because they are relying on help and they are not trying to sustain themselves. Now,
POI.
further elaborations on my second argument that we are avoiding external manipulation. Now, because what happened in Malaysia back in the 90s, the US manipulated our Malaysian ringgit and therefore decreasing our exports decreasing our exports drastically. So this has a very bad impact to Malaysia at the time. Therefore, relying on other countries on exports as a part of our economic stance is not really a good idea. And rather, we believe that ASEAN should sustain itself economically and politically. And I'll be moving on to my only and single extension, which is what the Prime Minister said. Now, before that, any POIs?
POI.
Yes.
Perhaps you perhaps apa sama kan?
Hello, anybody there?
Time for the POI.
Oh, sorry.
It's past 15 seconds already. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I will continue. Now moving on to my extensions that what the Prime Minister said that about abundance of resource. Now we want to limit external exploitation of resource because of what happened in the past, like during during the colonialism period. Now that is my only extensions. Now I'll be moving on to my final part of my speech, which is the conclusion. So how the side government see the world in how does we see ASEAN in the side government? Now what we want ASEAN in our side of the world is that we want ASEAN to be firstly a strong, united, and self-sufficient region. Secondly, ASEAN is capable of thriving independently from global influence or from global powers. And lastly, we want a world where ASEAN makes the region that value where Southeast Asia is a region that values sovereignty, regional stability, and cooperation, which would be a long-term effect for ASEAN countries to continue grow to be a first world country. Now, what are the trade-offs that we see in this debate? Yes, the opposition might say that we limit foreign partners, but at the very least, we can sustain our economy in themselves, and we can avoid our economy from being intervened or from being sabotaged by foreign powers. And I, as the Deputy Prime Minister, have never been proud to propose this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just I want to note that that was 7 minutes and 40 seconds. Please limit the time to 7 minutes 15 at max. I will not be writing anything after 7 minutes 15. All right, now to close up the opening half of the debate, I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition whenever you're ready. Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Just give me a couple of minutes to prepare it.
Can't hear you. Hello? Yellow?
I will let me prepare.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I will begin my speech. I will begin my speech.
Me too.
Now, imagine ASEAN countries missing out on the chances to drive global trade and innovation by turning inward, which is isolationism. Isolationism could cripple our ability to shape the future and stop or slow down economic opportunities. Now, I'm gonna give out in this speech, I'm gonna give my definition, my burden, my stance, and two arguments and a couple of rebuttals. Now, the opening government mentioned how that uh, ASEAN countries should rely on itself because, uh, as you can see before, countries like Africa, which receive help a lot, uh, have not yet reached economic stability and a good infrastructure in their country. Now, to rebut against the argument is the first thing is that the reason that Africa is not as advanced as it should be, even though it's receiving help, is because you don't see any African countries doing having good relationship with other African countries and other uh, Euro country, Asian countries or American countries. Now, the second point they mentioned is because a country only needs to rely on itself to pursue economic stability and social stability. Now, this is wrong because there are several uh, resources that are not available in ASEAN, such as uh, organic materials. Now, to miss out on these resources is to sabotage our own economic growth because we could use a lot of these resources to improve our own economy. Moving on, I will give up my definition, burden, and stance. Now, the definition of isolationism is a policy of remaining apart from other affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of other countries. Now, the definition of ASEAN is basically a group of countries in the South Asian uh, part of the world. Now, I will give up three burdens. The first burden is to prove whether or not isolationism will cause more harm than good. The second burden is to prove why ASEAN countries should not pursue isolationism. And the third burden is for the government to prove how isolationism could benefit ASEAN countries more than ASEAN countries not pursuing isolationism. Now, my first argument is it will reduce innovation among ASEAN countries. Why is this true? The first reason why this is true is because there are no diplomatic affairs and relationship. The reason why this could and impact and result in reduced innovation is because uh, it will cause resource scarcity among ASEAN countries, which could restrict access to these, which could restrict ASEAN countries to these resources, such as microchips, real metal, rare metals, and organic materials. Because as you can see, one of the biggest microchip producing in the world is China and Taiwan. So if we if we isolate ourselves from having relationship and good resources with these countries, we are limiting ourselves from innovating our technology and our own country and no more building. Yeah, and moving on. Now, the second reason why this is true is because there are fewer opportunity to collaborate. Now, the reason why this is important is because collaboration is key to success. It's key for a better success, a better future. Now, the reason why countries should collaborate is because they have many ideas, many views, and many technologies they could share to make better technologies and to improve their own citizens' life and other citizens' life. You can see, such as the collaboration of many countries on the ISS, which they successfully succeed in making a space station. Now, The reason why this is important is because if there are less innovation, it will lead to less problem being solved. Problems such as uh, problems such as uh, global warming, starvation, and poverty. Now, my my second argument is there will be no global influences from the ASEAN countries. Now, the reason this is true is because the loss of negotiating power. Since ASEAN countries reject and try to isolate themselves from other countries, they are missing out and they are isolating and limiting their ability to influence global trade rules and policies, and basically they are limiting themselves to influence other countries to the way they want them. The reason the second reason why this is true is because since there are no collaboration from ASEAN countries and other parts of the world, it will mean that since collaboration is essential for facing challenges such as climate change, human rights, and health crises, as I mentioned before, ASEAN countries will struggle to combat against this problem. Now, moving on to why this is important. The first reason why this is important is because it will sabotage and reduce our access to global networks and resources. This will in turn make ASEAN countries does not have all the resources they have or need in the world. Like I mentioned before, resources such as rare metals and you know organic materials, since they don't have the access to these resources which are available in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, they are sabotaging themselves economically uh, and in terms of technology innovation. So in conclusion, in our world, ASEAN countries will prosper with better technologies and better relationship with a lot of countries around the world. In the government side, in the government world, they refuse to see the big issue of surrounding the economic growth and national relationship and social and security. Now I have given all the reason why. Now since humans since we are humans, we live in group of hunter and gatherers, and it's against our human nature to not receive help and aid, which means it's against our human nature to not receive good relationship and aid from other parts of the world. Now I have given my reasons why opening opposition should win and speech.
All right, thank you, Oo. Now I'd like to invite the member of government to introduce the opposing government, please.
Give me a second to set up my timer.
Oh, yeah. By the way, before we start, if you want to ask your eyes, I do recommend everyone to keep track because I think it's a bit difficult to clap during the speech. So yeah, like every other speaker, if you want to keep track of time and to when to ask your eyes and stuff, please do keep your own time of others of the current speaker. Thanks.
Start my speech in 2, 1. I think the opening half of this debate is just giving a grocery list of benefits without actually explaining what ASEAN actually means and what does these treaties constitute. We say that this is not about individual countries cutting ties with like major superpowers. No, this is about the ASEAN bloc itself focusing more on creating treaties that will benefit ASEAN countries in the first place. We are not cutting ties with other countries. I want to be clear of that. I have 3 things to do in my speech. Number 1, I'm going to recharacterize this debate. Second and third, I'm going to go into my arguments. Firstly, let's do some recharacterization on what ASEAN actually is. We say that ASEAN is not like the East Asian countries itself. ASEAN is like a block of countries, like a gathering of 10 countries to form and put a political and economical form of teams that is going to benefit themselves and will want to focus more on things such as culture, and will focus more on economic prosperity that will also going to be more suitable towards these countries, because realize that these countries are similar in nature. These countries are coastal countries that face similar challenges. For example, we look at Jakarta is sinking. We say that they are more likely going to focus more on benefiting these countries. And also, ASEAN countries are created to maintain peace and stability in Southeast Asian countries. Therefore, if you want to include external factors, this may like breach the sovereignty and may breach the peace and stability of Southeast Asian countries. So what does this treaties look like? This is like bilateral. It can occur bilaterally or multilaterally, which means like two countries only or multilateral. For example, in economically terms, we are going to establish trade partners and loyal partners and cross innovation from Southeast Asian countries in ASEAN only. Let's go towards my rebuttals. I think the whole rebuttal is simple, because the whole rebuttal about national security, economic growth, or you are going to reduce technology and innovation, you have no access towards resources. We say that this is rebutted by saying that we actually preserve economic partners. We also have like individual countries like Malaysia, we still are going to do trade with the US. We are still going to do trade with China. The difference is the ASEAN bloc itself, the gathering of countries itself are going to focus more on these ASEAN countries. Why? Because we need to have independent, we need to be independent of other countries. We need to not be too dependent on outside sources. This is why this bloc is created in the first place. But let's take them at their best and rebut one by one. They talk about national security and we can't get military aid. Two responses. Number one, we see that on opposition side, like no treaties outside even provide military power in the first place. There has never been a case where US is going to provide troops towards outside of the house and towards like Malaysia. But secondly, we see that individual countries also have alliances. We are also alliance with Indonesia. We are also alliance with Jakarta. We see that this is enough for us to have enough security in the first place. And they also talk about economic growth. And I'm going to flip this argument and give my argument about how we are actually are better in providing economic growth. First argument then is about how we don't allow exploitation of other countries. The thesis of this argument is we say that superpower countries are incentivized to exploit. Why? Because they want to consolidate power. US wants to consolidate power, and China wants to have a foothold on our natural resources. They want to capitalize on natural resources because it is a good thing. They want to have a prosperous economic trade. Why is this bad? Because they are going to create misleading treaties. And this is what we are going to sway away from, like opening government. From opening government, we are going to provide analysis on why they are going to be exploited in the first place. We see that treaties are long pages of text. It is very hard to interpret. Also, it is very hard to evaluate the long-term sustainability of these treaties itself. Why is this? How are these superpower countries going to exploit this? Two things. Number one, they are not going to emphasize important things inside these treaties itself. They are going to make sure that these countries are deceived by them. But secondly, they are going to use deceiving tactics. That is to say, they are going to give irresistible short-term reward for like long-term economic gain towards these superpower countries. What is the harm? Number one, you are going to destroy the sovereignty of these countries. For example, we see in China Silk Belt Road initiative where China get a piece of your land, but countries are crippled in debt. We don't want that outside of the house. We don't stand where countries are too dependent on China. Countries don't have their own sovereignty and countries are unable to be dependent on their own economic grounds. But secondly, Southeast Asian countries are going to bow down to superpowers. For example, if Asian countries, ASEAN countries are going to create a treaty with US and US exploits them, at the end of the day, US is going to take this initiative and force countries to support US in like their stance inside the Palestinian-Israel genocide. We have to be forced to support Israel at the worst cases of scenario. But second argument then is about how we are going to improve creating treaties that benefit ASEAN countries in two ways. Number one is on economic stability and economic prosperity. I think OG talked about this, but we are going to go in deeper. Why? Because we are going to increase the competitive nature of ASEAN countries. We are not going to rely on others. We are going to create our own own products to export. This is why we are able to be more dependent, because if superpower countries are going to pull out of these treaties, we are going to fall down. We are not going to have the stability that we need, the independent economy that we have. But secondly, in terms of currency exchange, it is better for us to have good trading partners inside ASEAN, because trading outside of the ASEAN bloc will depreciate the currency. If you want to trade with US, you have to exchange your currency towards the US dollar. Therefore, you are going to siphon your money outside. And also, it is going to be far more expensive for you to import things from outside. You will become more dependent. And also, number two, we are going to have faster treaties, because these treaties are not going to be dependent on other countries, and you won't have territorial disputes. Because when you are going to create treaties that is about territorial disputes, you are not going to involve China. With China is very bad in terms of taking the land inside our South China Sea. If you want a side where we actually benefit the countries of Southeast Asia, side by side of closing government.
All right, thank you to the member of government to introduce the closing opposition case. I'd like to invite the member of opposition.
Okay, am I audible? Am I audible?
You're not audible. Could you your mic might be a bit further away from the mouth?
Hello.
I think your my headphone has earphones. You should probably pull out that thing and then put it in your mouth. Your headphones. There is I think there's like a microphone on the left of your ear. Yep, there. Just pull it out.
I have another microphone connected and it's wired and it's picking up
Okay,
this
then
mic.
in that case, use the wired one lah. I thought
Yeah.
that was the one that's being muffled. All right. Now it's much more audible. You speak a bit louder because I think it's slightly muffled, but yeah.
All right. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A very good example of what this isolationism looks like would be North Korea. And with this ideology, we can prove now a comparative on why we win into this debate. All right, so a few things I'm going to do into this debate. First of all, I'll be giving out my rebuttals towards government side. Second of all, I'll be characterizing this debate as a suffering from a severe lack of characterization. And third of all, I'll be giving out my arguments into this debate. Now, first of all, moving on to rebuttals. First of all, in the entirety of OG's case of these Asian countries, of bringing safety to these Asian countries, because no influence of political ideology, and the barriers will be closed so that no foreigners can enter except in certain special cases. We have to understand, yes, in theory, superficially, this can protect these Asian countries from the rest of the world, by the expense of the safety happening inside of your own country. Take North Korea, for example. North Korea is the best example of a country actually adopting this isolation kind of thing. And we can see the effects and we can see what's happening inside of North Korea at this very moment. North Korea is a very it's a very rundown country. It's very economically unstable. It's in severe poverty, and it's lacking much technological advancement that is needed to turn into a developing country. So we argue that the nationwide effects that happen because of this isolationism is severely more detrimental, and is far more likelihood and is substantially more likely to happen than what international influence might bring, which is just a lot of assertions coming from opening government side. Second of all, the whole ideology that colonization is going to happen if isolationism is not pursued. Understand that colonization is something of the past. Colonization right now in this day and age, in the 21st century, is nearly impossible or relatively unfeasible to do because of the new rules and regulations that we implemented in this world, and the fact and the fact that this world changes along with the rules and regulations set upon all the countries of the world. Colonization and isolationism are two separate things. I'll clarify that in my characterization later. All right, third of all, government's point of conserving resources domestically. Understand that a good chunk of Asian countries, such as Myanmar and Laos, are considered rural countries, which means they are weak fiat countries economically. This proves that there is no point of them trying to conserve resources if they want to turn from a developing country to a developed country. The only way for them, or rather the most efficient way for them to improve economically wise, is to make trade in the global markets and open up and foster good relationships with other countries. If they pursue, and this is the true stakeholders of this debate, we have to look at these Asian countries, the rural Asian countries in the first place. Even for the countries that are doing relatively well in the Asian Union, such as Singapore, Indonesia, and even Malaysia, we say that because of this isolationism, not only will developing countries be making the situation 10 times worse, we also argue that for countries doing relatively well economically, they're going to be making their economy significantly worse, and they're also going to become socially deprived. All right, moving on to my characterization. First characterization. We have to understand that a treaty does not just mean stuff like signing a paper so that you can guarantee safety for the country, but it also stands true for economical agreement. Take Malaysia for example. Malaysia right now is on the rise of becoming a next global chip giant. Tech giants from around the world are planting manufacturing factories in Malaysia to manufacture like computer chips. To manufacture computer chips. And Malaysia and these tech giants, they all benefit from this. Malaysia gets to improve their economy and exit this middle trap that they've been stuck in for a few decades. And these countries gets to export and manufacture more of their products. So it's a win-win situation for both. All right. Let me give second characterization. A clear visualization of what this isolationism looks like in the first place. What it looks like is cutting a nation from the influence or the interaction with the entire world. For example, we'll take North Korea again. North Korea has very strict guidelines when entering or leaving, and they have little to no AR. The only international relation that we can see is that they have it with China. But even now in the 21st century, we are saying that right now the international relationship between North Korea and China is only worsening. Everything in North Korea is manufactured locally. The economy is used locally, and technology is used locally. So what does this look like visually? This country, as I said earlier, looks very technologically economically deprived. It's in constant poverty. Trying to buy a car in North Korea is roughly the same as trying to obtain a mansion in America. That's how bad it is. Okay. Third characterization. What is the current state of these Asian countries right now? We have to understand, as I've said, a good chunk of these countries, like Myanmar and Laos, they are all rural countries. As I've said earlier in my characterization, there is no point for them to pursue. There is little to no benefits for them trying to pursue isolationism, as their country is already like not very well economically, but they're just making it even more worse. And this proves true even for countries doing economically relatively well. All right, so my arguments go under the tagline of maintaining good political and diplomatic relationships. I have to understand that maintaining good IRs in this day and age is critical for development in already developed countries. So why is this true? Because by maintaining international relations, we can maintain good relations. We can guarantee the safety of the relationship. We can open up trade between both countries. And they are both benefit from it and they both mutually exclusively benefit from it. For example, the Asian countries, if they were to open trade with America, the Asian countries get to become more technologically advanced, as America is able to economically help them and also send them the technology, and America also benefits from that because of the geopolitical placing of these Asian countries. It's very strategic. Now the impacts of that argument is that is that the countries that are developed, the countries that are developing, would be able to, can be able to go on an arguably very meteoric rise as compared to isolationism, where they have little to no chance of developing at all, as we can see as a example from North Korea. And for these already relatively well-off countries, they're able to increase their economic wealth more, as opposed to isolationism, where this is just not reasonable and not feasible. And with that, we say side with closing opposition. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Close up the government half of the debate. I'd like to invite Government Whip.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Throughout this debate, all teams misunderstood the true meaning of isolationism. This can be seen from the opening half of both sides of government and side of opposition, and from closing up. So, what really is isolationism? From closing up, what I get is isolationism looks like North Korea, but that's the wrong and that's the false meaning of isolationism. Isolationism means that the exclusion of other countries in creation of treaties within ASEAN itself. So this doesn't mean that you don't want to make treaties with other outside countries. This doesn't mean that you don't want to make no, this does not mean that you don't want to make future treaties without other countries. This does not mean that you want to isolate yourself with ASEAN in like the corner of the world inside a cave alone. This does not mean that you would cut ties with other countries as in like status quo. So all of the argument with all of that said falls down, but I will be rebutting more in my rebuttal. So two things I will be doing in my speech. First of all, I will be rebutting all cases coming from side opposition and tell you why our government side cases actually reign supreme. And secondly, I will be telling you why we are actually much more unique compared to opening government. So, firstly, what are the main pushes coming from side opening opposition and closing opposition? Their pushes are two. Firstly, poor economy, and secondly, bad security because of like less diplomatic relationship. Let's take a look at poor economy. So they said that there would be less exports, and then they talk about the grocery list of why bad economy affects people. Okay, obviously, and then secondly, they say that ASEAN cannot just rely on themselves; that they need to have ties with other countries to actually thrive in economy. Okay, the thing is here, countries in this motion, ASEAN won't cut ties with other countries. So we still keep all the benefits in status quo. So this exists in mutual side. The different thing in our world is we would like to exercise the practice of isolationism in our world with ASEAN countries itself. So we would like to implement treaties with each other without the influence of other big countries in our treaties. So this brings a lot of benefits, and I will be explaining it in the argument that is the government's main push. So why does big countries won't cut ties with ASEAN countries if they practice isolationism? So first of all, two responses here. First of all, ASEAN are developing countries, so they have small control in economy in terms of internationally. So big countries would see ASEAN as not kind of like a threat for them. So big countries won't like have the incentive to go out of their way to actually cut ties with ASEAN countries in of it itself. So, and then secondly, big countries like US or China still depend on ASEAN countries for their rich and raw resource, for example, rubber and natural gas. So this means that we still keep all the benefits of like relationships in status quo in our world and then an added benefit of we practicing isolationism, which I will be explaining in the argument which that the government side is actually pushing to you, opposition. So what is the main argument that is being pushed to you, opposition, without you actually engaging with our argument? So for context, we will actually improve ASEAN economy with the practice of isolationism. Why? First of all, a few frameworks. ASEAN is a bunch of developing countries, for example, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Myanmar, which are aiming to improve their economy with this block of ASEAN. So, by the way, we are closing government. My member of government actually characterize why ASEAN is a block and not just like a country that is some sort like clumped up. So this is why we are a little bit unique from opening government. And then secondly, the ASEAN community with the practice of isolationism, they would trade with each other, they would make like connection with each other to boost their economy. So what does this look like? This looks like free trading to actually boost the economy of ASEAN in of itself without the influence of big countries. So why is it better to do this without other countries? So first, note that big countries would take advantage of the resource-rich countries in ASEAN, because big countries, if they were in our city, they would have the incentive to actually take advantage of our rich resource, because ASEAN is unique. They have a rich raw resource. So countries like US, China will be manipulative, and we as the Asian countries will actually bow to them all the time, and our resources are being extracted every day. And then this argument bring by my member of government is actually not engaged by the closing member of opposition. So with all of that said, in the end of the day, we actually keep all the mutual benefits coming from status quo. So all of your argument, so this means that all of the opposition side argument of like poor economy, no innovation and bad security because less diplomatic relationship, that all falls down, because we actually prove to you just why we keep ties with other countries in of it itself. We just would like to practice isolationism with within the ASEAN bloc to actually hinder any negative influence from big countries, because we are developing countries and we need economic benefits now. So why are second phase of my speech? So why are opening government is less unique than closing government? My team. So my member of government actually tell you, Judge, why in our argument of improving economy, there would be big companies, big countries will actually manipulate and like implement dirty tactics to actually lie and manipulate our Asian countries through contracts and through tricks. And secondly, we actually tell you that there is a mutual benefit that exists in both sides. And secondly, we tell you that all the status quo benefits that exist on the opposition side actually exist in our side, and we tell you that we destroy every one of your arguments. And this is why I think that the closing government should win this debate, and we reign supreme above all. I rest my case.
All right, thank you to closing government. Close up the debate. I like to invite the opposition whip.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yep.
Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, it's quite funny that side of government is trying to push for a better world for the ASEAN nations, but then again, they fail to actually have good statements that actually align with the interests of these ASEAN nations. Now, a few things I'll be doing into this debate. First, a few important responses to the side of government. Second, I'll be comparing the issues and clashes into this debate. And lastly, I'll be comparing to this case and tell you why the win goes to closing up. Now, first, a few rebuttals. Yeah, first of all, coming to the side of government, we acknowledge the fact that we understand that ASEAN is a bloc, not just a singular country. But we also tell you that just because that these ASEAN countries inside of ASEAN are going to have this trade with each other, we tell you that it's still not enough for them to actually achieve this economical stability and this economical strength. We tell you that it's just simply not enough. Because even if when you look at status quo, for example, countries like Singapore, they're not having this economical strength because they're
trading with countries in ASEAN. We tell you that they're having this economical strength because they're trading with countries like, for example, the major countries. For example, countries like China, countries like the US. But we tell you that even if side of opposition tells you, side of government tells you that these big countries will take advantage, these big countries are manipulative and they just want to exploit these smaller nations or these ASEAN nations for our resources, I'll tell you why this is wrong later in my issues and clashes. Now, second response, the side of government have been kept on telling you on how they want to improve stability, how they want to ensure safety in their country, how they want to ensure sovereignty. Now, first point, regarding sovereignty, understand that sovereignty itself does not necessarily require isolation. In fact, by engaging with other nations internationally, it actually helps ASEAN to strengthen its sovereignty. We tell you that diplomatic and economic engagements, these treaties that these ASEAN countries do with international countries outside of ASEAN, actually sets up a platform for these ASEAN countries to assert their interests. In that way, this can actually benefit them positively. Now, third layer of response. Now, coming towards the opening gulf. I feel like the opening gulf case is quite messy. First of all, they told you that the reason why they need this isolationism is because of the mass entrance of foreigners. Well, this is obviously wrong. And then they told you because of this, there's job competitions. And job competitions aren't even like something that's important towards the debate. And they also talked about how on their side, they're going to focus on their infrastructure. And first of all, understand, no thanks. They also told you that they're going to be focusing on their infrastructure now that they're not having this like engagements with these countries outside of ASEAN. Now, we tell you that these countries necessarily, since they're not necessarily in the good economical state, we tell you that it's quite hard for them to actually do this. And second point, they also told you that in their side also, they get to attain this economical stability and such. And they told you that these countries can use their resources to utilize it to actually trade with like countries in ASEAN. Now, first of all, understand that ASEAN itself consists of countries who sometimes, and most of them actually are in rural areas. Countries like Myanmar, countries like Laos, countries like Cambodia. What this means is that, for example, countries like Myanmar, they are not doing necessarily well in terms of economics. Meaning to say, they have relatively small domestic markets. Meaning to say that they have limited purchasing power. What this actually means is that they don't have the capabilities to actually have this trade even in ASEAN. But when you have this trade internationally, mean to say with these major countries, for example, countries like the US, countries like China, countries like Japan, who want to do trade with countries like Myanmar for their resources, we tell you that it's much more beneficial towards these countries because of the fact that because of their unique resources, we tell you that they can actually benefit of more coming from these major countries. And we also tell you that since these countries are highly dependent on exports and foreign investment for growth, we tell you that once you promote and once you pursue this isolationism, we tell you that you completely cut off and reduce the access for them to do things like international marketing trading. We tell you that it's something that leads to a decrease in like its export revenues, which will obviously slow down the economic growth of these ASEAN countries. Now, what has the closing government given you? The only contention they've given you is that they've given you a recharacterization on what ASEAN nations really look like. But we tell you that even if we didn't get it that spot on in my first speaker, I'll tell you why it's necessarily not that important. We tell you that even if ASEAN countries were still to do trade with the countries inside ASEAN, we tell you that it's still beneficial, it's still essentially not enough for you to actually attain this economic stability. And second point, they talked about how even if you were to do this isolation, they told you that these big countries still wouldn't cut ties. But understand, obviously, it's not the big countries that's going to cut. Obviously, these big countries wouldn't cut ties with these ASEAN nations. It's because these ASEAN nations itself are going to be the ones cutting ties. It's because these ASEAN nations itself are going to be the ones doing this isolation. So you have to understand that. Now, next response. They told you that these big countries' main incentive is to take advantage and to be manipulative. Now, one thing that I feel like side of government is trying to play on right now is they think that we're living in the 1957s where we're still colonized. Understand that we're in 2024, meaning to say that countries in ASEAN, obviously, they're not that. We're obviously like smarter than how we were like back in the days when we were colonized. If you want to push this idea that we're going to be colonized and we're going to be taken advantage and manipulated for our resources, we tell you that it's essentially not strong enough for you to win this debate. We tell you that it's essentially an assertion. We tell you that it's essentially an assumption. Mean to say that they just told you that these big countries just want your resources. Now, what have we given you into this debate? What we've given you is simple. My first speaker has already told you how by not pursuing isolationism, we actually get this strong diplomatic and we have this strong influence in terms of internationally. Meaning to say that this safety that side of government tries to propose to you, we actually attain in side of opposition better. Meaning to say that what we have on side of opposition actually is something more sustainable, meaning to say that we have better international ties with other countries. So that means when we have things like good diplomatic influence, we actually, for example, if we are being attacked, for instance, like side of government keep on trying to push to us or like trying to be manipulated, we tell you that since we have this diplomatic influence as ASEAN, as an ASEAN bloc, we tell you that we can be actively supported. And one response towards the opening up, they told you that countries like of Africa, even though they have this international relation, they're still not doing relatively well. We tell you that the reason for this is because Africa itself does not have a union, does not have an organization like ASEAN. So we tell you that's the reason why. Now, let's also compare like what now what makes sites closing more unique than site opening. What we've given you essentially is a better characterization, meaning to say that we've actually given you a clear picture on what this debate actually looks like. We've already given you the benefits. We've already given you what the hubs essentially look like inside of government. We've already proven to you how essentially, even if what we tried to propose, we told you that even if what the benefits the government tried to propose to you did happen, we tell you that on side of opposition, we still get it done better. And we tell you that for all of those reasons, if you want to side with better, if you want to side with a better environment for this ASEAN bloc, we tell you side with side of closing off. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all the debaters. So please stay in the room. I will be back in about 5 minutes with a verdict. All right, hi everyone. Can I just quickly look at the speaking order? So OG, can I know who spoke first?
Muaz spoke first.
Okay. How about OO?
What?
Sorry,
Nisa.
OO. I think Nisa speaks first and then Ahmad, right? Okay.
Yes.
How about CG?
Haiman speaks first and then Iman.
Haiman spoke first then.
Yes, yes.
Okay. CO?
The CEO, Anas spoke first, and then Arfan was opposition leader.
Okay, yeah. Give me a second while I submit the ballot and then I'll be back with the result. Right. Thank you everyone for the debate. So here's how I'm going to structure my OA. Yeah. So the first, I'm going to give you some general comments on what I thought about the debate and what I think that all teams could have used to improve. Second, I'm going to give you the results. And third, I'm going to give you a justification on why I got those two results. So the first, give some general comments. I think a lot of teams here operated on assumptions on what isolationism looks like to them. And I think it's very, very important to note here that there is a literal info slide that was given to us for this debate, which is namely that it is treaty. It is basically countries moving towards not including other countries in international treaties. That is the only info slide that's given. What I thought happened in this debate was that while I'm sure all of you read the info slide, I think you guys sort of jumped into your own understanding of what isolationism looks like, right? In this case, looks like things like immigration or removing trades. While not necessarily outside of the scope of what isolationism means, I still think that it should be like debated within the context of the info slide, and you should have at least given me some justification of what isolationism or why removing from treaties automatically translates to reducing like immigration or improving like trade, etc. I think it's important for you to draw a distinction. In this case, it probably would help if you were to draw real life examples of not just randomly throwing out countries that are quote unquote isolationist, but actual treaties that might be relevant to this debate. Maybe the Pan-Pacific Trade Agreement or whatever. But again, this requires a bit of reading up. It's yeah. So that's just one. So what ended up happening in this debate, because teams sort of debated their own understanding of isolationism for the most part, we had teams sort of not really engaging with each other because they have their own idea of isolationism. Like, oh, isolationism means that you don't have immigrants in or you reduce immigration. And then isolationism, on the other hand, looks like other teams actually you improving trade with other countries, or not going to isolation means that you improve trade with other countries, etc. Well, not necessarily drawing the link to how treaties translate into that. So with that in mind, that's just my main general comment. I think because of that, it's sort of all the problems of this debate sort of stemmed from that issue. I think it helps for teams to sort of debate in the worlds that other teams did. So in this case, like, if you notice that in a debate that other teams are sort of debating in their own world and not really debating in what the motion slide is trying to do, I think it's correct to debate in the info slide or your world, and you think that your world is correct, where it's also helpful for you to also look at their world and engage them in their world. for example, if OG talks about immigration and like isolationism equals to less immigration, and OO or some like points out that that's not necessarily the case, then you can sort of go like, even if that was true about immigration, here's why immigration is good, or here's why like here's why their case or their harms are not necessarily true. It is great for you to do that and not necessarily just go like, oh no, isolationism is not just about immigration, and then not responding to their case. I think it would have helped your case a lot if you had engaged with them directly and talked about what their case is in their best case scenario, even assuming if their context was true. Yeah. So keep in mind, I do recommend you use that, yeah, for all if in case the motion in round 5 probably gets complicated as well. With that in mind, here are the results. So congratulations. I thought it was a short cross debate. Congratulations to closing government. Second goes to opening opposition. Third goes to opening government. And fourth, unfortunately, goes to closing opposition. Right. So here's my justification for this debate. So again, as I mentioned in the general debate, in my general comments, what ended up happening was that debaters or teams had debated or operated in their own worlds, right? And their own characterization of what isolationism looks like. What's important to me then in this context is that I have to look at the team that actually fits within the criteria